Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Today we have talked about Jim Harbaugh's decision to come to an agreement with the LA Chargers as their head coach. We just wrapped up a segment on the Phoenix Suns, and now that we are halfway through the NBA season, every team has played at least half of their games of the 2023-24 season. I will be handing out my NBA Midseason awards. I am going to start this with the MVP award, and I don't think that there is a ton of debate given just where we are today in the season. And that is Joel Embiid. And I am a Celtics fan, so I've never been the biggest Embiid guy. I'm not a Sixers fan. But what he is doing is truly historic. It is incredible, the run that he has been on here offensively, scoring 21 straight games with 30 or more points. And I think that we've seen this year that after James Harden was traded to start off this season, Joel Embiid was sort of handed the keys to become the full offense. James Harden calls himself the system. This is the system of Joel Embiid, and it is dominating so far this season. He's averaging 36.1 points per game on 54% from the field, and he's even shooting 36% from three, so adding that little bit of extra danger to his repertoire, it just becomes that much harder to guard him when he's able to space out the floor. We've seen what he can do in the mid-range. He's been lethal there, hitting the shots, and because he's hitting the shots, he's forcing defenders to step up on him and guard him, in which a lot of the time he uses that to his advantage, especially against these smaller defenders where he can bait them into fouls, and that's where he gets a lot of his job done, averaging over 12 free throw attempts per game, and he is very good at knocking those down as well. So he has just been a one-man wrecking crew on offense, and it's not just his scoring is the thing. He assists on over 32% of his teammates' made shots. That is in the 98th percentile of all big men across the league. If I had a complaint with him early in his career, it was that a lot of turnovers off of double teams, and that's sort of how the Joel Embiid system was slowed down come the postseason. You've seen year in, year out, he's improved at that, and as a result, it just leads to such better offense, and I wouldn't say flawless, but near flawless from an as good as you can do as an individual performer in the NBA. The one glaring issue for Joel Embiid as far as locking up this MVP, and also I do want to point out with this award and with all awards, this happens every year where we think somebody's a lock. 41 games is a lot of time for things to change. So none of these are set in stone. These are just where we stand today. And as far as Joel Embiid, you could be asking yourself, well, how could it be anybody but Embiid winning the MVP? That would be because of games played. The NBA implemented a rule this season in which players have to play in at least 65 games to be eligible for all NBA awards as well as all NBA teams. And right now, as it currently stands, Joel Embiid is not on pace to reach that 65 game threshold. He has played in 32 out of 42 games for the 76ers this season. In an 82-game season, that paces out to be 62 and a half. We can call it 63 games for the sake of it, but that would make him ineligible for all of these recognitions. A lot of people have a problem with the rule here about whether or not this should be in place. Me personally, I think that for the MVP award, it is fair. And for the record, only one player in NBA history has won MVP with playing less than 65 games across an 82-game season. That was Bill Walton in 1978. So it's not like this is a crazy, turning around the entire league, the entire history of the award thing. This has been the case for the majority of the NBA's existence and the 82-game season. So I don't have a problem with it for that. I think that if Joel Embiid plays 64 games and he's averaging the exact same stat line that he does, for him to not make any sort of an All-NBA team, I think that would be crazy. So I think that there should be a little more leniency when it comes to that, but ultimately I don't have the biggest problem in the world with setting that mark for the MVP award. If he doesn't, I think that, and if you were to disqualify him, because technically 65 games is 79% of the season, Joel Embiid has played in 76% of his team's games this year. So if you want to disqualify him, my pick would be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I think that he is having a phenomenal season as well. Should be on his way to another All-NBA first-team selection. He's the best player on the number one team in the Western Conference. So I think that would be the next logical pick for MVP. Rookie of the Year. Now, I know it can be a little contested on the internet as far as who should be the Rookie of the Year, and it depends on what scope you look at the NBA Rookie of the Year award through. It's between Victor Wembanyama and Chet Holmgren. The Spurs are really bad, but the Rookie of the Year award has never taken winning into account, and that's why I have Victor Wembanyama as the Rookie of the Year. The only time that I can really remember this winning argument being so prominent was in the 2017 and 18 season between Ben Simmons and Donovan Mitchell, where Mitchell was the number one scorer. He was the entire offensive identity, really, of the Utah Jazz as they went on to win 48 games, and his team was the 5 seed in a Western Conference where at that point they were better than the East. Simmons was also very good. I know that obviously the past handful of years for Ben Simmons have been pretty much non-existent, really. But if you had stock in him before, it's been incredibly disappointing. For the sake of he's not even playing anymore, there's clearly something going on sort of mentally with him ever since it seems like that Atlanta Hawks series that they lost a few years ago, and he passed up on the layup and passed it out to his teammate, and since then the media's been all over him. He hasn't been himself. So in this season though, in 17-18, Simmons was third in his team in scoring, so a lot of people were saying, well, Mitchell's the number one option on a more winning team than Ben Simmons is. It should go to him. And I know this isn't a perfect comparison because the Sixers were a 3 seed this year. I believe they still had 1 less games than the Jazz, but that was at least the season that I had heard of the winning argument in Rookie of the Year before, and Ben Simmons ended up winning it. So it did not come into effect there. I think that the Spurs are horrendous, and they've been a little unfairly taking up national TV slots. But if you actually sit down and watch these games and just power through the blowouts, you'll see Victor Wembanyama is incredible. And Chet Holmgren is really good too, but he's not as good as Wemby in my opinion. Wemby is averaging 20, 10, and 3 while leading the NBA in blocks per game with 3 point something. The defense is 8 points per 100 possessions better with him on the court versus off. This is a Spurs team that is not good on defense, and they are significantly worse when he is not on the court to sort of take on that defensive anchor. He's played most of the season without a true point guard. The Spurs were starting Jeremy Sohan for a lot of the season there, which never made sense to me. The fact that they never even really attempted to get a point guard in the offseason was disappointing in my books. But now that Trey Jones is in there, the offense looks a little more functional, and I think that Wemby is really coming to into his own as the season goes on. Even in some of these losses, the Joel Embiid 70-point game, Wemby had 30, and I was really surprised by, yes, Embiid had 30, but I had never seen a player be able to guard him in that mid-range area as effectively as he did. Now, Embiid got him on a couple possessions, but I think he has the framework to be great. And yes, he's definitely going to have to put on some muscle. Embiid, when he wanted to actually go inside on him, he was able to. But he's a rookie. He's 20 or so years old. He has time. Like I said, Chet's having a really nice season as well. Some advanced analytics don't really like him. The on-off differential shows that OKC is actually better when he is off the court. He has an expected -9 wins to Wembanyama's +5. Now, we don't need to get too caught up in these advanced analytics. The big thing is, if you swap their situations, would the Thunder be any worse? I don't think so. And I'm going with Wemby on this one. Sort of running out of time here, so we'll go a little bit more rapid fire on these final awards. Defensive Player of the Year, I have Rudy Gobert, the future Hall of Famer, and don't forget it, I know he gets a lot of slack as well, but he is a generational defender. He's the defensive anchor on the best defense in the league, and I think that he will be racking up another one of these Defensive Player of the Year awards to his collection already. Coach of the Year, sticking with the Timberwolves, I have Chris Finch, where I know that people were sort of killing the Timberwolves this week because of how poor the Cat 64-point performance ended in a loss was and all of that. But people were killing them even harder last year when the front office traded as much as they did for Rudy Gobert, and it looked like a disaster for a while. But they've been able to turn a corner. They've been much better this season. I think that Chris Finch deserves credit. Also, on the note of that loss to Charlotte where Cat had 64, there was no Mike Conley. Yes, it's probably a little concerning that not having that one leader, everything goes to a bad place for the Timberwolves there. But Chris Finch sort of got on his team in the post-game presser, held them accountable. I think from the perception is that his team responded, and they are looking to improve from there out. I think that OKC's Mark Daigneault, he also deserves some appreciation for this, but I have Finch as of right now. Most improved player, I have Tyrese Maxey. I typically don't love giving a player who just sort of takes on a bigger role. I think it's a little reductive, especially because if you watched Maxey last year, you knew he was a really good player, but he has improved some. Statistically, up 5.5 points, up 3 assists per game. Philly's offense is 13 points per 100 possessions better with him on the court. This is the 99th percentile for all guards, so that's impressive. There just aren't a ton of other candidates, I feel like, for this award. Kobe White maybe has a chance to steal this down the stretch, where he was playing much less last year, and he had earned his opportunities more so this year than a personnel change, and he has been great this year, started every game for the Heat. Finally, Sixth Man of the Year. This one was tough for me. It was between two players. I ultimately decided to go with Malik Monk. I think that he is a true bench guy, hasn't started a game for the Kings all season. He's averaging 15 and 5.5 on 44 and 39 splits. He's improved a ton as a playmaker, and I think that he really brings a lot of energy to that Kings team. Tim Hardaway Jr., I think, is having a very under-the-radar season, despite averaging the most points off the bench in the NBA this season. So he deserves some consideration as well. I have Monk in this case, but if you had Tim Hardaway Jr., I wouldn't argue too hard. So that is all we have time for today on the show. Thank you very much for tuning in. Remember to like and follow, and for future reference, if you ever want to help us out here as the show hosts, myself and my co-workers, remember to use streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip to help get your donations in, help get your questions the priority they deserve. So we will be back tomorrow, same time, 2 o'clock. Going to be doing some NFL Conference Championship preview. Really looking forward to it. So we will see you then.